My name is Claire Bennett. I am 39 years old. 3 weeks ago, my family sat my daughter in a dining room surrounded by lawyers and legal papers while I was downstairs making coffee. I didn't know it was an ambush yet. I only knew that something felt wrong. You learn to recognize certain silences when you grow up around family members who smile with their mouths and calculate with their eyes. There is a kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels organized. That morning had started strangely. My grandmother's house had always been loud. Even after she passed away 6 days earlier, people moved through it carrying casseroles, folding chairs, sympathy cards, and old stories. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and coffee because Grandma used to bake every Sunday no matter who was coming over. She believed food fixed things. Not permanently. Just enough for people to breathe. I remember standing at the counter stirring cream into my coffee when I noticed something unusual. Nobody was in the kitchen. My Aunt Denise practically lived in kitchens during family gatherings. My brother Ethan couldn't go 15 minutes without opening refrigerators and pretending he wasn't looking for leftovers. But that morning the room was empty. Completely empty. I heard low voices upstairs. I remember looking at the clock on the microwave. 10:14 a.m. Then I heard my daughter's laugh. Olivia had just turned 18 2 months earlier. She had my dark hair and my mother's eyes and this habit of pushing hair behind her ear whenever she felt nervous. She'd done it since she was little. When she was 6 years old, she used to sit beside Grandma on the porch steps every summer evening with coloring books spread around her knees. Grandma used to tell her stories about stars. Not the scientific kind. The made-up kind. She'd point into the sky and say things like, "That one belongs to stubborn people who survived hard things." Olivia believed every word. Honestly, so did I. I started toward the staircase carrying my coffee mug. Then I heard my cousin Jason say something. "Just sign it and everything stays simple." I stopped moving. Simple. Families use that word a lot when they want something from you. Simple usually means easier for them. Not for you. I climbed slowly. The old wooden stairs creaked beneath my feet exactly the way they always had. Grandma's house was 73 years old and every board knew how to complain. Halfway up I saw the dining room door was partially closed. That was strange too. Nobody closed doors in Grandma's house. Not unless they didn't want someone hearing something. I heard another voice. A man's voice I didn't recognize. Professional. Calm. Legally speaking, this would streamline the process considerably. I felt my stomach tighten. Then Olivia said quietly, "I don't understand." There are moments in your life when every instinct wakes up at once. That was mine. I pushed the door open. 5 people looked at me. Olivia sat at the end of the table. My Aunt Denise sat beside her. My brother Ethan sat across from her. Jason sat near the window. 2 men in suits sat near stacks of papers. Nobody spoke. Not immediately. Olivia looked relieved. Actually relieved. That hit me harder than anything. Because relief means someone was waiting for help. I looked at the papers. Legal forms. Folders. Property documents. Grandma's name appeared across several pages. I looked at Denise. "What is this?" She smiled too quickly. "We didn't want to bother you." People also say that right before they say something unbelievable. I looked at Olivia. "Honey?" She pushed her hair behind her ear. "Nervous. I think they're explaining Grandma's estate." I looked back at Denise. "Explaining it without me?" Denise folded her hands together. "Claire, don't make this dramatic." Dramatic. That word again. Funny how people preparing surprises with lawyers always accuse someone else of creating drama. One of the men stood. He extended his hand. "Richard Hale." I didn't shake it. He lowered his hand slowly. We're simply reviewing inheritance transitions. Inheritance transitions. I stared at him. Then I stared at Olivia. Then I looked down at the papers again. One number immediately caught my attention. $430,000. I felt something cold move through my chest. Because Grandma never talked much about money. But I knew one thing. 3 years earlier she had sold family land outside Mill Creek. 112 acres. I remembered because Ethan spent weeks talking about what he'd buy if he ever inherited money. A truck. A boat. Something else. He changed answers constantly. Grandma had laughed afterward and said, people spend money before they even own it. At the time everyone laughed. Everyone except Grandma. I looked back at the table. Nobody was smiling now. I looked back at the table. Nobody was smiling now. For a few seconds I just stood there holding my coffee mug while everyone avoided looking directly at me. It was strange how quickly people become interested in ceilings, windows, and papers when truth walks into a room. Olivia looked from me to Denise. Then back to me. Mom? I set the mug down on a side table near the wall. Slowly. Very slowly. Because when I get angry, I become quieter, not louder. I learned that years ago. I learned it after spending half my life around people who used volume as a weapon. I pulled out a chair beside Olivia and sat down. Then I looked at Richard Hale. Start over. He adjusted his tie. Mrs. Bennet. Start over. His eyes moved briefly toward Denise. Just briefly. But I saw it. I saw the tiny look people give when they're checking instructions from someone else. Then he folded his hands. Your grandmother's estate appears to contain several financial assets, investment accounts, and property interests. I waited. Go on. We've prepared paperwork intended to simplify ownership transfer procedures. I looked down at the documents. Then I looked at Olivia. Honey, did anyone tell you what you're signing? Olivia looked uncertain. They said Grandma wanted things handled privately. Privately. I looked at Denise again. She smiled. Again. Same smile. Same careful expression. Claire, honestly, we're trying to protect Olivia from unnecessary stress. Protect. Another interesting word. People love using soft words while doing hard things. I reached toward the papers. Richard moved his hand slightly. Just slightly. But enough. Enough for me to notice. Enough for my stomach to sink lower. I looked directly at him. Move your hand. He blinked. What? Move your hand. Slowly he moved it away. I picked up the first document. Property transfer authorization. The second. Asset distribution agreement. Third. Temporary management authority. Fourth. Limited decision assignment. I kept reading. Then I saw something that made me stop. Olivia's name appeared beside multiple lines. But underneath several sections another name appeared repeatedly. Ethan Bennett. My brother. I read it again. Then again. Maybe 4 times. Because sometimes your brain rejects what your eyes are seeing. I looked at Ethan. He suddenly became very interested in his watch. Ethan. Nothing. Ethan. He looked up. What? I held up the paper. Why does this say temporary financial oversight transfers to you? Silence. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Olivia looked confused. What does that mean? Nobody answered her. I looked at Richard. What does that mean? He cleared his throat. It grants administrative authority regarding management decisions. I stared at him. English. Another silence. Then he said quietly, it would allow Mr. Bennet to oversee inherited assets temporarily. Olivia looked at Ethan. You'd control Grandma's money? Ethan shifted in his chair. It's not like that. Olivia frowned. Then what is it like? Nobody answered immediately. Outside I heard a lawnmower somewhere down the street. I remember that. Funny what your mind notices during strange moments. The sound drifted through the open window while everyone sat there pretending words had become difficult. Then Denise sighed. Claire, your daughter is young. I looked at her. Continue. She's 18. I kept staring. Denise folded her arms. There are complicated financial matters involved. I said nothing. There are taxes and investments and responsibilities. Still nothing. Then she said it. We just think Ethan would make stronger decisions. The room became very still. Olivia looked at Denise. Then at Ethan. Then at me. I watched understanding slowly appear across my daughter's face. Slowly. Painfully. Like watching clouds cover sunlight. She looked back at Denise. You think I can't handle my own inheritance? Denise leaned forward quickly. No, sweetheart, that's not what I meant. But everyone knew that's exactly what she meant. Everyone. Olivia looked down at her hands. She'd stopped pushing hair behind her ear. Now she was twisting her fingers together instead. She used to do that as a little girl whenever kids at school excluded her. I hated seeing it. Hated it. Because I knew exactly where she learned that feeling. From this family. From people who smiled while measuring your worth. Then Ethan finally spoke. Claire, stop acting like we're stealing something. I looked at him. Really looked at him. My older brother. 43 years old. Gray beginning at his temples. Expensive watch. Pressed shirt. And suddenly I remembered something Grandma said 8 months earlier while we sat on her porch drinking tea. She'd stared across the yard for a long time. Then quietly said. Some people count what belongs to others before they count what belongs to themselves. At the time I thought she was talking about neighbors. Now I wasn't so sure. I looked back at the papers. Then I saw something else. A date. 3 days ago. Documents prepared 3 days ago. Grandma had died 6 days ago. 3 days. I stared at it. Because something wasn't adding up. Not even close. I stared at it. Because something wasn't adding up. Not even close. I looked down at the date again. Prepared 3 days ago. Grandma had passed away 6 days ago on a Tuesday morning at 7:42 a.m. I remembered because I had been holding her hand when the monitor went silent. Olivia had been standing on the other side of the bed crying quietly. Ethan hadn't arrived until almost an hour later. Denise came after him. Jason arrived sometime after noon. 3 days ago would have been Friday. Friday. I looked at Richard Hale. When were these prepared? He hesitated. Only for a second. But sometimes 1 second tells you everything. Friday afternoon. I nodded slowly. Friday afternoon. I looked at Ethan. So Grandma had barely been gone 72 hours and you were already preparing transfer documents? Ethan rolled his shoulders. Someone had to handle things. Someone had to handle things. I kept looking at him. Because suddenly memories started connecting themselves. Small things. Things I hadn't paid attention to before. Ethan volunteering to organize Grandma's office. Denise insisting she collect mail from the front porch. Jason offering to sort financial records. Helpful people become very interesting when money enters a room. I looked toward Olivia. She was staring at the papers now. Not confused anymore. Quiet. Very quiet. And I knew that silence Mothers know things. We know when our children stop feeling safe. I reached over and squeezed her hand beneath the table. Then I looked back at Richard. Did my mother sign anything before she died? Richard blinked. My understanding is no. My understanding. I repeated the word slowly. My understanding. He adjusted his tie again. Lawyers touch their ties a lot when conversations become uncomfortable. At least this one did. Then Denise leaned forward. Claire, honestly, why are you acting suspicious? I looked at her. Because I almost laughed. Almost. Suspicious. 5 adults had placed my 18-year-old daughter inside a room with legal paperwork while intentionally keeping me downstairs. And I was suspicious. Imagine that. I leaned back in my chair. When exactly was I supposed to find out about this? Denise crossed her arms. We were going to explain everything. When? Silence. I waited. Nobody answered. I looked at Olivia. Honey, did they ask you to call me up here? She looked down. No. Did anyone tell you not to? A pause. Then she nodded once. Just once. My chest tightened. I looked at Denise. What exactly did you say? Denise looked irritated now. Actually irritated. Not guilty. Not nervous. Irritated. Like I was creating inconvenience. We told her there was no reason to upset you. Upset me. I nodded slowly. Then looked at Olivia. What did they tell you? Her voice was quiet. They said Grandma wanted me protected. I waited. They said handling money gets complicated. I kept waiting. Then her eyes lifted toward Ethan. And they said Uncle Ethan already understood how these things work. Nobody moved. I looked at my brother. He didn't look back. Instead he stared toward the window. Outside a bird landed near Grandma's bird feeder. Grandma loved cardinals. She used to say they meant visitors. I don't know if that's true. But I remember thinking about it then. Because suddenly I missed her terribly. Missed her in a sharp way. The kind that catches you unexpectedly. Because if Grandma had been alive, this conversation would never have happened. Never. Then Olivia spoke again. Quietly. Mom? I turned toward her. Her eyes looked wet. Not crying yet. Close. Very close. Do you think they were trying to trick me? The room became completely still. I looked around at every face at that table. Denise. Ethan. Jason. Richard. The second lawyer near the window who had barely spoken all morning. I looked at each one. Then I looked back at my daughter. And I realized something. This wasn't actually about money anymore. Money mattered. Of course it mattered. But sitting beside me was my daughter asking whether people she trusted had tried to manipulate her. That kind of question stays with people. For years. Sometimes forever. I squeezed her hand again. Then I said carefully. I think nobody signs anything today. Ethan suddenly sat forward. Claire. I looked at him. No. His mouth closed. Then I stood up. I gathered every paper into a stack. Richard stood halfway. Mrs. Bennet, legally those documents. I picked up the entire folder. Good. He stared. Because my voice hadn't changed. Not even slightly. Still calm. Still quiet. Then I looked directly at Ethan. And for the first time that morning I saw something different in his face. Not irritation. Not confidence. Concern. Small. But there. Because for the first time since I entered that room, he realized something. I wasn't arguing. I was paying attention. I wasn't arguing. I was paying attention. There is a difference. Arguments are loud. Arguments move quickly. People interrupt each other, defend themselves, throw emotions around like plates breaking against kitchen floors. Paying attention is quiet. And quiet makes certain people nervous. I carried the folder downstairs with Olivia walking beside me. Behind us I could hear chairs moving and low voices beginning again. Nobody followed immediately. That told me something too. Confident people don't whisper after you leave rooms. I walked into Grandma's kitchen and set the papers beside the coffee maker. The coffee I'd made earlier had gone cold. I looked at the microwave clock. 10:37 a.m. 23 minutes. Only 23 minutes had passed since I'd started walking upstairs. It felt longer. Olivia sat at the kitchen table. For a while neither of us said anything. The kitchen still smelled like cinnamon. Someone had left half a pie covered with foil near the stove. Grandma used to make 2 pies whenever family visited. One for dinner. One because somebody always wanted seconds later. I looked at the empty chair beside the window. Grandma's chair. She sat there every morning drinking tea and doing crossword puzzles with a little blue pen she carried in her sweater pocket. Suddenly Olivia spoke. "Mom?" I turned. Did Grandma trust Uncle Ethan? Simple question. Complicated answer. I sat down across from her. Then I thought about it. Really thought about it. Grandma loved Ethan. She loved all of us. But trust and love aren't always the same thing. I remembered Christmas 4 years earlier when Ethan had borrowed money from Grandma. $20,000. Temporary, he'd said. Business problems. Short term. He'd pay her back quickly. Then months passed. Then a year. Then 2 years. Nobody talked about it anymore. Except once. Only once. Grandma and I had been planting flowers near the porch when she'd suddenly said, "Claire, some people borrow money. Others borrow time." I'd asked what she meant. She never answered. Just kept planting. I looked back at Olivia. I think Grandma loved Ethan. Olivia waited. I looked out the window. I think Grandma understood Ethan. There was a difference. Olivia looked down at her hands. Then she nodded slowly. A minute later footsteps came down the stairs. Denise entered first. Ethan behind her. Jason behind him. Interesting. Families have formations. Leaders walk first. Followers come after. Denise sat down across from us. Claire. I looked at her. We got off on the wrong foot. I almost smiled. Almost. Because people usually say that after stepping directly on your foot. Not before. She folded her hands carefully. I think emotions are high right now. I said nothing. And I understand losing Mom has been hard on everyone. Still nothing. Then Ethan sat down. Nobody's trying to take anything from Olivia. I looked at him. Then why wasn't I invited upstairs? Silence. He looked at Denise. Denise looked at Jason. Jason suddenly examined the table. Interesting again. Because truth usually has eye contact. Lies look around rooms. Finally Ethan sighed. We thought you'd overreact. I nodded slowly. Overreact. There was another family word. Another useful little label. Families sometimes assign labels to avoid responsibility. Difficult. Sensitive. Emotional. Overreacting. Once somebody wears the label, you no longer need to listen to them. I learned that years ago. Actually, I learned it when I was 12. I was 12 the first time I heard my family call me dramatic. My father had forgotten to pick me up from school. 3 hours. 3 hours sitting on concrete steps outside the building while teachers slowly left one by one. When Dad finally arrived, I was crying. I remember Denise laughing softly and saying, "Oh, stop being dramatic. You waited a little while." A little while. 3 hours. Funny how numbers tell different stories than people do. I looked at Ethan now. Then I looked at Denise. Then I reached over and opened the folder again. I started reading carefully. Page after page. Quietly. Nobody spoke. They watched me. Then I stopped. Because there it was. Halfway through the documents. Small paragraph. Tiny print. Temporary authority could extend 90 days under certain circumstances. 90 days. I kept reading. Authority included account access, property decisions, investment movement, asset management. I looked up slowly. Very slowly. Ethan. He looked at me. How many days exactly were you planning to manage Olivia's inheritance? His face changed. Just slightly. But enough. Enough to make my stomach sink lower. Because people don't react that way when they've done nothing wrong. Because people don't react that way when they've done nothing wrong. For a moment Ethan didn't answer. He just stared at me. Then at the papers. Then back at me. It was temporary. Temporary. I looked down at the page again. 90 days. 3 months. Long enough to move things. Long enough to make decisions. Long enough to create problems. I looked back up. Temporary can still do damage. Denise shifted in her chair. "Claire, you're acting like Ethan planned some elaborate scheme." I turned toward her. "Did he?" Silence. Absolute silence. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller. Outside, wind moved through the trees near the porch. I could hear leaves brushing against the windows. Olivia sat beside me without speaking. I could feel her watching everyone. Watching faces. Watching reactions. Children spend years learning adults. Even grown children do. Then Jason cleared his throat. "Look, maybe we pushed things too quickly." Everybody looked at him. Interesting. Because Jason had barely spoken all morning. People stay quiet when plans are going well. They start talking when plans stop going well. Denise frowned. "Jason." "No." He rubbed his forehead. "No, Denise." Then he looked at me. "We thought Olivia would sign." Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. For a second I honestly wondered if I'd heard him wrong. I looked at him. "You thought she would what?" Jason swallowed. "We thought she'd trust us." Olivia stared at him. I stared at him. Then slowly I looked at Ethan. His jaw tightened. Denise looked furious. Not at Jason. At being interrupted. At truth arriving early. I sat back. Very slowly. Because suddenly things were becoming clearer. Clearer in the way puzzles become clearer once corner pieces appear. You expected her to sign without reading anything. Jason looked down. No answer. No denial either. Just silence. Silence answers a lot of questions. Then Olivia spoke. Her voice was soft. Very soft. "Why?" Everybody looked at her. She looked at Ethan. Then Denise. Then Jason. "Why would you think I wouldn't read it?" Nobody answered. She looked at Ethan again. "Why?" Ethan rubbed his face. "It's not like that." She kept staring. "Then tell me what it's like." He lowered his hand. Then sighed. Long. Tired. I was trying to help. Olivia looked at him for several seconds. Then quietly asked. Help who? Nobody spoke. Nobody. And there it was. One little question. 6 letters. Help who? Because intentions become interesting when you force them into specific shapes. Help me? Help her? Help yourself? Suddenly vague words stopped working. I looked down at the paperwork again. Then I noticed something sticking out near the back of the folder. A yellow note. Small. Folded. I frowned. I didn't remember seeing it earlier. I pulled it free. Denise immediately sat forward. Claire, that's probably nothing. Probably. Another interesting word. I unfolded the paper. Then stopped. Completely stopped. Because I recognized the handwriting instantly. Grandma's. I would have recognized it anywhere. The letters leaned slightly to the right. And near the bottom her writing always became looser when her hands got tired. Just like this. The note wasn't long. Only 3 lines. Claire. Remind Olivia that important things should always be read twice. Love. Mom. Nobody moved. Nobody said anything. I read it again. Then again. Olivia leaned closer. What is it? I handed her the note. Her eyes moved across the page. Then her mouth opened slightly. Because she recognized it too. Grandma used to leave notes everywhere. Inside books. Inside cabinets. Inside birthday cards. Sometimes taped inside lunchboxes when Olivia was younger. Little messages. Little reminders. I looked at Denise. Her face had gone pale. Not dramatically. Just enough. Enough. Where did this come from? No answer. I looked at Ethan. Where did this come from? He looked genuinely confused. Actually confused. Then Jason frowned. I've never seen that before. Olivia looked up from the paper. She looked emotional now. Not crying. Close. Very close. Then quietly she said. Grandma knew. Nobody spoke. She looked at me. Mom. Her voice shook a little. Do you think Grandma knew something like this would happen? I stared at the note. At Grandma's handwriting. At the words. Read important things twice. Then I remembered something. Suddenly. Sharp and clear. 3 months ago Grandma had handed me a small metal box from her bedroom closet. I'd completely forgotten about it. Completely. Because of hospitals. Because of grief. Because life becomes blurry after losing people. I remembered standing in her room while she smiled and said, "Keep this for me." I remembered asking what was inside. And I remembered exactly what she said. Receipts. I remembered exactly what she said. Receipts. For a second I forgot about the kitchen. Forgot about Ethan. Forgot about Denise and Jason and lawyers and papers spread across the table. Because suddenly I was back in Grandma's bedroom 3 months earlier. Late afternoon sunlight had been coming through lace curtains near the window. Dust floated through the light in slow little pieces. Grandma sat on the edge of her bed wearing a pale green sweater. The same sweater she always wore when she felt cold. She held a small metal box in both hands. Nothing fancy. Just a faded gray lockbox with scratches along the corners. I remembered laughing. Mom, what exactly am I protecting here? Secret government files? Grandma smiled. Not a big smile. Just one of those small smiles she used when she already knew something you didn't. Receipts. That was all she'd said. Then she handed me the box. I remember noticing how light it felt. Not heavy enough for money. Not heavy enough for jewelry. Just papers. I'd put it in my hallway closet after bringing it home. Then hospitals happened. Then medications. Then sleepless nights. Then funeral arrangements. Life pushed the memory somewhere quiet. Until now. I looked up. Ethan. He looked at me. 3 months ago Grandma gave me a box. Nobody spoke. I watched his face carefully. Very carefully. Because sometimes people react before they think. And reactions tell the truth. What kind of box? Too fast. Much too fast. I stared at him. Then I looked at Denise. Her expression had changed. Only slightly. But enough. Concern. Real concern. I stood up. Olivia looked at me. Mom? I grabbed my purse from the kitchen counter. I'll be back. Denise stood quickly. Claire. No. She stopped. Because something in my voice had changed. Still calm. Still quiet. But different. Like a door closing. I looked at Olivia. Honey, come with me. Ethan stood too. What box? I looked at him. The one Grandma apparently didn't tell you about. Then I walked toward the front door. Behind me I heard footsteps. Denise. Ethan, sit down. Her voice was low. Sharp. I didn't turn around. But I heard it. And hearing it made something cold settle inside my chest. Because Denise wasn't asking questions. She wasn't confused. She wasn't curious. She sounded worried. Olivia and I got into my car. Neither of us spoke for almost a minute. I started the engine. Then backed slowly out of Grandma's driveway. The house grew smaller in the mirror. Olivia stared out her window. Finally she spoke. You think something's in the box? I kept my eyes on the road. I don't know. She looked at me. You do. I glanced toward her briefly. Because she was right. I did. I just didn't know what. The drive home took 15 minutes. 15 quiet minutes. I kept thinking about Ethan's face. About Denise stopping him. About the note. Read important things twice. Receipts. By the time we pulled into my driveway, my stomach felt tight. Not scared exactly. More like waiting. Waiting for something you can't see yet. We walked inside. Straight to the hallway closet. I moved winter coats aside. Old umbrellas. Storage bins. Then there it was. Gray metal. Scratched corners. Exactly where I'd left it. I stared at it for a second. Funny. Funny how ordinary important things look. Olivia stood beside me. That's it? I nodded. That's it. I carried it into the kitchen and set it on the table. No lock. Just a latch. I opened it slowly. Inside were folders. 5 of them. Blue. Green. Yellow. White. Red. Everything was labeled in Grandma's handwriting. Taxes. Property. Letters. Accounts. Then one folder near the bottom caught my attention. Family. Just family. Nothing else. I looked at Olivia. Then opened it. Inside were documents. Lots of them. Bank statements. Photocopies. Notes. Printed emails. And clipped together near the top was a yellow sticky note. Again Grandma's handwriting. Claire. If you're reading this, I was probably right. I felt my breath stop. Olivia moved closer. I kept reading. Some people count things before they belong to them. I wanted proof. So I kept receipts. Love. Mom. Neither of us moved. For several seconds we just stared. Then I turned the page underneath. And suddenly I understood why Grandma called them receipts. Because the first document was a photocopy of a check. $20,000. Payable to Ethan Bennett. The first document was a photocopy of a check. $20,000. Payable to Ethan Bennett. I stared at it. Then looked at the date. 4 years earlier. Christmas week. I remembered that loan. Business problems. Temporary help. I flipped to the next page. Another check. $8,000. 18 months later. Then another. 5,000. Then 12,000. Then 3,500. The papers kept going. Loan after loan. Check after check. I looked at Olivia. She looked back at me. Neither of us spoke. Because sometimes numbers speak loudly enough on their own. I started adding them together in my head. 20. 8. 5. 12. 3.5. 7. 10. I stopped. Then started again because I thought I'd made a mistake. I hadn't. $65,500. 65,500. I sat down slowly. Because suddenly memories were rearranging themselves again. Ethan buying a new truck 2 years ago. Ethan taking vacations. Ethan talking about business investments. And every family gathering after that where he complained about money. Complained. I looked through more pages. There were handwritten notes attached beside certain checks. Paid back, no. Paid back, partial. Discuss later. Then one note stopped me. Ethan says Denise doesn't need to know. I frowned. Because Denise obviously knew something now. Maybe not then. But now. I kept turning pages. Then Olivia touched my arm. Mom. I looked over. She pointed toward the bottom of the folder. There was another envelope. Smaller. Sealed. Across the front Grandma had written. For Claire and Olivia together. My chest tightened. I picked it up carefully. Then opened it. Inside was a letter. 3 pages. Grandma's handwriting. I unfolded the first page. My hands were shaking a little. Just a little. I started reading aloud. Claire and Olivia. If you're reading this, then I was right about something I hoped I was wrong about. I paused. Then kept reading. Families are strange things. Love and disappointment sometimes live in the same room and pretend not to notice each other. Olivia moved closer beside me. I continued. I love Ethan. I love Denise. I love everyone. But love doesn't make people honest. I stopped again. Outside a car drove past the house. For some reason I remember hearing it. Remember hearing tires against pavement while sitting there. I looked at Olivia. Her eyes looked wet now. I kept reading. Claire, I noticed people becoming interested in my money long before I became interested in leaving it behind. I watched conversations change. I watched questions change. I watched timing change. So I started keeping records. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I wanted truth. My throat tightened. I kept reading. Olivia, sweetheart, if they ever make you feel small, remember something for me. People who rush you usually benefit from your silence. Read things twice. Ask questions 3 times. Then trust your own feet. Because they carried you farther than anyone else's opinions ever will. Olivia started crying quietly. Not loudly. Just tears slipping down her face. I put my arm around her. Then looked at the final page. The last paragraph had been underlined. If anyone challenges what belongs to Olivia, take the blue folder. Receipts matter. I stared at the words. Then slowly looked back inside the box. Blue folder. I pulled it out. Property. Trust records. Attorney correspondence. I opened it. And immediately froze. Because sitting on top was a business card. Margaret Lawson. Estate attorney. Underneath it was a handwritten note. Claire. Call Margaret first. Not Ethan. Not Denise. Margaret already knows everything. For several seconds neither Olivia nor I moved. Then Olivia looked up at me. Mom. I looked at her. She wiped her eyes. Very quietly she asked. Do you think Grandma planned for this? I stared at the business card in my hand. Then I thought about the note upstairs. Read important things twice. I thought about the hidden folder. The checks. The records. The letters. Then I thought about Denise stopping Ethan from following us. And suddenly something became very clear. Grandma hadn't just left receipts. Grandma had left witnesses. Grandma hadn't just left receipts. Grandma had left witnesses. I stared at Margaret Lawson's business card for several seconds. Then I picked up my phone. The call lasted exactly 11 seconds before it changed everything. Lawson and Reed. Margaret Lawson, please. May I ask who's calling? My name is Claire Bennett. A pause. Then. One moment. I looked at Olivia while we waited. She sat quietly beside me holding Grandma's letter with both hands. Still reading pieces of it again. Still crying a little. Then another voice came through. Older. Calm. Claire. Not Claire Bennett. Not Mrs. Bennett. Just Claire. Like she'd been expecting me. I sat straighter. This is Margaret Lawson? Yes. I swallowed. I found a box my mother left. Silence. Then. You found it. Not a question. A statement. You knew about it? Another pause. Then Margaret said quietly. Claire, are Ethan or Denise with you? My stomach tightened immediately. No. Good. Good. Not okay. Not I understand. Good. I looked at Olivia. Then back toward the kitchen window. Margaret, what exactly is happening? I heard papers moving on her end. Then she spoke carefully. Your mother came to me 18 months ago. 18 months. Not weeks. Not days. 18 months. She wanted to update her estate planning. I sat completely still. Margaret continued. Specifically, she wanted legal protection around Olivia's inheritance. I looked at Olivia. Her eyes widened. Protection from what? Margaret was quiet for a second. Then. Protection from family pressure. The kitchen suddenly felt very still. Very quiet. Because hearing a thought inside your own head is one thing. Hearing it from a lawyer is something else. Margaret continued. Claire, your mother had concerns regarding Ethan. I closed my eyes briefly. Just briefly. Then opened them again. What concerns? Repeated requests for money. I looked toward the scattered checks across the table. Financial instability. Another paper turning. And attempts to discuss future inheritance distributions while your mother was still alive. I felt something heavy settle inside my chest. Because suddenly I remembered things. Little things. Ethan asking Grandma questions during dinner. Questions that felt harmless then. What happens with the house? What about the land sale money? What are you planning with investments? I hadn't thought much about it before. Now I did. Margaret spoke again. Claire. Yes? Did anyone ask Olivia to sign anything today? I looked at the stack of papers beside me. Yes. Silence. Long silence. Then. Do not sign anything. My grip tightened around the phone. Why? Then Margaret said 7 words that made the entire room disappear around me. Because Olivia already owns everything. I stopped breathing for a second. Actually stopped. Beside me Olivia stared. What? Margaret's voice stayed calm. Your mother transferred nearly all protected assets into an irrevocable trust 14 months ago. I looked down. I looked at the papers. Then back toward Olivia. Meaning what? Meaning nobody can legally redirect or control Olivia's inheritance. Silence. Then Margaret added. Not Ethan. A pause. Not Denise. Another pause. And not the documents they placed in front of her today. I sat there staring at nothing. Because upstairs at Grandma's house my family had gathered lawyers and paperwork and signatures and confidence. And none of it mattered. Not one page. Not one signature. Not one plan. Grandma had already finished the fight before it started. I looked at Olivia. Slowly. Very slowly. She looked back at me. Then she whispered. They knew? I stared toward the window. Thought about Ethan. About Denise. About that room upstairs. About the way they'd looked when I walked in. Then quietly I said. I think we're about to find out exactly what they knew.